We diagnosed the pain. We exposed the trap. Now comes the part most people never reach. There's a point where the decision stops being theoretical. Nothing on the outside changes yet. No action. No announcement. No plan. But something inside you locks. Not with certainty. With resolve. This is the moment most people skip. They rush past it. They try to replace it with productivity. But without this moment, everything that follows collapses back into avoidance. Because the real shift doesn't happen when you do something. It happens when you stop leaving yourself an exit. Up until now, you've kept one door open. A mental escape. A way to tell yourself you could always go back to how things were. That door is what made delay feel safe. This is the moment you close it. Quietly. Not out of pressure. Not out of panic. Out of honesty. You admit something that hasn't been said clearly before: I'm no longer willing to carry this level of tension. Not forever. Not as my baseline. Not as the price of being responsible. That sentence doesn't fix anything. But it changes everything. Because once you say it internally, the rules change. You stop negotiating with discomfort. You stop asking how long you can tolerate this. You stop pretending that endurance equals strength. You don't suddenly feel brave. You feel grounded. The nervous system recognizes this shift immediately. Not as relief. As alignment. The background noise doesn't vanish, but it reorganizes. The tension that used to float everywhere starts to gather in one place. At the point of decision. That's important. Because scattered tension drains you. Focused tension moves you. This is the commitment. Not to a specific outcome. Not to a perfect plan. To clarity over comfort. To direction over drift. To facing what's true instead of managing what's tolerable. You're not promising to get it right. You're refusing to keep it vague. And that refusal is irreversible. You can still hesitate. You can still feel unsure. But you can't unknow this line. You can't go back to pretending that later is neutral. You can't unsee that inaction has been choosing for you. That's why this moment feels quiet. Heavy. Stable. It's not a rush of motivation. It's a settling. The sense that whatever comes next, it will be faced on purpose. This is where people think the hard part begins. They're wrong. The hardest part was stopping the internal negotiation. You've done that now. And because of that, the next step won't require force. It will require follow-through. That's where we go next. Not to urgency. Not to pressure. To the first clear movement that only becomes possible after you've stopped giving yourself permission to drift. After that internal line is crossed, something subtle changes. Not immediately in your circumstances. Not yet in your numbers. Not even in your mood. It changes in how you relate to tension. Before, tension felt like something to manage. Something to dampen. Something to keep quiet so you could keep functioning. Now it feels like information. Not loud. Not urgent. Directional. You don't suddenly feel calm. But you stop feeling confused about why you're not calm. That matters. Because confusion drains you more than difficulty ever did. You notice it in small moments. When you think about money, your mind no longer spins, it narrows. When discomfort shows up, you don't rush to mute it. You don't need to resolve it yet. You just recognize it. And recognition changes your posture. You're no longer asking, how do I make this feeling go away? You're starting to ask, what is this pointing to? That question is new. And it doesn't let you go back. This is the new state. Not peace. Not certainty. Orientation. You're facing something now instead of circling it. And once you're oriented, the old coping strategies stop fitting. Avoidance feels clumsy. Distraction feels thin. Later feels dishonest. Not because you forced yourself to change, but because you no longer believe the story that made those strategies work. That belief collapsed quietly. And without it, the behaviors lose their power. This is why the tension hasn't disappeared. It's not supposed to. Tension is still here because something still needs to move. But it's different tension. It doesn't scatter your attention. It gathers it. It doesn't ask you to escape. It asks you to prepare. This is where many people think they're done. They're not. They've just reached the starting line. Because orientation without structure doesn't last. Clarity without a framework eventually turns back into pressure. And if you don't understand what to do with this new state, you'll slide back into the same patterns, not because you want to, but because you haven't replaced them yet. That's the risk point. The moment after resolve, before direction. This is why the next step matters more than motivation ever could. Not what you do, but how you begin thinking differently about money itself. Because until you see money clearly, every decision will still feel heavier than it needs to be. That's what we haven't touched yet. Not the tactics. Not the math. The mental framework that determines whether money feels like a threat or a tool. That's where the real leverage is. And that's where we go next. In the next video, we'll break down the exact mental model that keeps financially capable adults stuck in tension, and why changing that model is the only thing that actually makes clarity sustainable. Not later. From here forward. This isn't the end of the process. It's the end of confusion. From here forward, money stops feeling like a constant threat, not because the numbers change, but because the way you relate to them does. In the next video, we'll break down the mental model that determines whether money controls you, or works for you. This is where orientation begins. If you want the framework that makes this clarity last, start the next playlist on this channel. Not motivation. Structure.